This? I thought this would be just right for you, Evelyn. It's appropriate for your age, don't you think? The instant those words settled into the room, Evelyn Miller felt her chest tighten sharply. It was Mother's Day afternoon, a time meant for gentle celebration, and yet it ushered in the quietest, most drawn-out 30 seconds she would ever know. Evelyn Miller, 71 years old. Once upon a time, she'd been an art teacher at a middle school on the edges of New York City. Drawing and painting were her greatest joys. Those years spent encouraging her students, showing them the power of free expression, were what she'd called the very reason I was alive. But life, winding as it does, led her elsewhere. In her 30s, she married, and as her husband's job sent them away, first upstate, then to the suburbs, she let go of her career, at least in the official sense. She learned to wear the badge of full-time housewife, though deep inside, she nursed a quiet hope. Someday, maybe, she'd open her own little gallery, hang her paintings around the sunlit walls, and let that dream come true. Reality had a way of silencing such dreams. Her husband, Michael, was a silent sort, never one for talks of art or wild ambitions. When their children finally arrived, days blurred into the endless repetition of chores, errands, and needs that came before her own. I always believed, without a doubt, that family should come first. That's how it was back then, she'd later say, looking back. Years slipped by. In 2018, Michael died of a sudden stroke. Everything familiar seemed to fall away at once. The old house they'd lived in for decades became too much for her alone, both in size and in cost. Evelyn moved in with her eldest son, David, and his wife, Katie. I just want to avoid being a burden as much as I can, she told herself over and over. So she threw herself into every routine, making dinner, cleaning, folding laundry, even waiting at the curb for her grandson's school bus. Every morning, she'd rise at dawn, fixing lunches before the rest of the family opened their eyes. Every night, she was the last one up, finishing the kitchen and scrubbing the tub before she'd quietly slip to her little room at the back of the house. This became her life, year after year. No one had demanded she do these things, not really. She did them because her heart insisted. She wanted to give, to help, to ease their lives as much as she could. And yet, somewhere along the way, Evelyn became aware of something odd. She could hardly remember the last time she'd heard someone say, "Thank you." Not for the pies she baked, the snow she shoveled, or even the weekly rides to soccer practice. And still, I shouldn't mind. I'm not doing all this for praise or some sort of reward. She'd force herself to hold fast to that thought. But each evening, as she stood alone in the kitchen, sipping her tea next to the humming fridge, a cold little ache would slow her breath. That familiar certainty being accepted, belonging as part of the family, seemed to fade with the years, until it was little more than a memory. Her grandson, Jason, hardly spoke to her now, caught up in middle school and friends. Always busy. Some evenings, the only word from David and Katie was a quick text from the car. "We'll grab dinner out tonight." Evelyn would write back, "Okay. Have a good time." She'd always smile, even though no one could see. She never wanted to be the reason anyone felt weighed down. She wanted to spare everyone from thinking of her as a burden. But that Mother's Day, when she received something appropriate for your age, set her world quietly crumbling. It was early April 2024. A soft, friendly sunlight poured across the living room carpet as Evelyn, set in her long habits, dusted the shelves and ran the vacuum, making her way between the kitchen and the hall. On this particular afternoon, she paused and turned off the vacuum to check the corners of the rug. That's when she overheard, drifting from upstairs, the low, almost careless voice of her daughter-in-law, Katie, speaking on the phone. "I don't really think we need to get her anything for Mother's Day, do we? I mean, my mother-in-law's not the type to want stuff anyway. As long as she's healthy, that's all that matters, right?" The words landed with a clarity that cut through every sound and every excuse. Are they talking about me? The question seized her. She could feel it in her hands, suddenly still and damp. She listened. The tone in Katie's voice was light, even breezy. A little laugh, like this conversation wasn't worth much thought. The whole thing sounded so harmless that it stung even deeper. If being healthy is enough, is that really how she feels? Or is it just an excuse? Is this her way of hinting that she doesn't want to give me anything at all? All the old doubts and fears, the ones Evelyn had pressed down, came squirming back. She remembered birthdays when the gift was a scented candle picked up quick at the store, or a card with a scratchy, "Have a wonderful day." She'd told herself not to mind. She really had. But hearing the truth so plainly was like stepping into chill water. It made her shiver inside. She wanted so much, and yet it wasn't things she longed for, not really. It was being seen. Being thanked, even once. Being known still as mom or grandma, or just a person with a life outside her chores. The 30 seconds after Katie's words seemed to last a whole season. Evelyn stood there, vacuum in hand, not moving even as the breeze tickled the curtains. She tried to swallow her disappointment, to let it pass. But that day, Mother's Day, when she received her gift and the words that came with it, she'd recognize the silence for what it was. Not peace, not contentment. This silence, at last, was loneliness. The old 30 seconds of quiet in the room had become a lifetime. And so, with the late spring sun slanting through the windows and the weight of unspoken words gathering in her chest, Evelyn Miller realized she could no longer pretend that everything was just fine. Not this time. Not anymore. The more Evelyn thought about it, the heavier her heart grew. What had started as a passing conversation, so brief but piercing, so raw, kept echoing through her mind. It was impossible to shake the feeling. Her place in the family, her very presence, was starting to feel optional, like she'd become invisible, or worse, something less than necessary. From that day forward, Evelyn found herself attuned to every little shift in the house's mood. Small signals stood out, a kind of change in the air, subtle but real. Take dinner, for example. Before, it wasn't unusual for someone to shout from the living room, "Come eat with us," around 6. Lately, though, invitations had shifted to quick messages. "We're having dinner out tonight. Don't wait up." It was a change easy to excuse at first, but over time it became unmistakable. Some evenings, Evelyn would stand in the kitchen, where the air still held the traces of someone's quick-cooked meal, feeling a quiet ache as she fixed herself a lonely supper. She'd scramble eggs, steam some broccoli, always making just enough for one, and sit at the long oak table, silent and spare. It became a familiar routine. "It's only temporary," she told herself. "The spring's just busy. It's end of the year for school, and plans just pile up." She tried to believe it. She worked to convince herself these things just happen, no meaning behind them. But as those little coincidences grew, stacking one on top of another, Evelyn had to face a thought she'd tried to ignore. Maybe it wasn't chance at all. "Are David and Katie avoiding me on purpose?" she wondered aloud to an empty kitchen. It wasn't just fewer dinner invitations. Conversations had gotten clipped and short. When Evelyn tried to chat asking about Jason's latest baseball game, or how work was going, she was met more and more with, "Sorry, I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later?" Soft enough not to feel like rejection, but distant all the same. April 10th arrived, a Wednesday as gray and quietly chilly as any, and the house barely made a sound. In the early afternoon, Evelyn drove her old Corolla to the neighborhood grocery store and wandered the produce aisle, feeling for something special. She picked up fresh asparagus and spring peas. She'd make something sunny, her own way of chasing spring into the kitchen. "I'll cook a nice meal tonight," she told herself. "It'll bring everyone together. Maybe they'll be glad," she thought. "Maybe they'll say thank you." Back at home, she prepared a bright spring risotto and roasted vegetable salad, moving slowly and carefully, pouring every bit of intention into the meal. By the time she set the table, sunlight had slanted gold and low against the sliding glass door. But no one came home. By 7, still nothing but the hum of the fridge. At last, Evelyn's phone lit up with a quick text. Plans changed, grabbing dinner with friends. Running late. Love you. She stared at those words, unmoving, unable to muster a reply. She looked at the kitchen. a cloud of steam still rising from the rice, mugs of tea cooling beside untouched plates. The whole room seemed draped in that same heaviness, tinged with a quiet sadness. Did those words Katie said a few days ago? As long as she's healthy? That's all that matters. Had they really meant nothing? Or had they been a sign, a warning she'd missed until now? Mother's Day was coming up fast, and the feeling started to settle in, slow and painful. Maybe I'm not someone worth doing anything for anymore. She didn't want much. Just a little joy on their faces, even for a moment. Just one. Thank you, enough to let her know she still mattered. That was all. With a sigh, Evelyn gathered up the serving bowls and began packing the risotto into freezer containers. She labeled them with neat, careful handwriting, though she wasn't sure anymore for whom she was saving them. That evening, as was her ritual, Evelyn opened her battered old notebook on the kitchen table. She held her pen, but no words would come. Every sentence dried up before it reached the page. The sensation caught in her throat, tight and unyielding. A silence pressed down so hard, it erased the words before she could even write them. At last, with a shaky hand, she scribbled one line. When did I start needing to tiptoe around my own family? She closed the notebook softly. Reflected in the shine of the dark window, Evelyn caught the weary shape of quiet worry in her eyes, a private uncertainty, one she could hardly name, let alone share aloud. May 12, 2024, a Sunday. Mother's Day. Like always, Evelyn Miller rose at 5 to the silver half-light of dawn. She opened the kitchen window. Soft May sunshine slipped in and dusted the countertop. The air was filled with the scent of wet grass and blooming azaleas along the fence. Mother's Day today, she murmured, mostly to the morning quiet. Let's try to make it a good one. She didn't expect anyone to hear, but she said it all the same. And with gentle steadiness, she started in on breakfast, hopeful for a day worth remembering. She took just a little extra care with everything, hoping it might make the day special. She simmered the chicken broth low and slow, made her signature creamed spinach, seasoned just the way Jason liked, and whipped up her famous scrambled eggs, fluffier and sweeter than usual this time. She ran her hand along the counter, double-checking every plate, every sprinkle of pepper, every little bowl. The coffee was dark and strong. She cooked the oatmeal slow on the stove, just as she had when David and Katie had first moved in after Michael died. For the table, she bought fresh oranges and squeezed them into bright, sweet juice. The toast came out golden brown. This was her way of starting Mother's Day, a day that, in her heart, still carried a quiet hope. She wanted, just for once in a long while, to gather everyone around the table together for a real family breakfast. Since I get this day only once a year, it would make me so happy if we could all sit down to breakfast together, even for just a little while. So, she laid everything out, forks and spoons, bowls and napkins, 3 places ready. She even set out the old blue vase and placed a sprig of lilac from the yard. Beside the pitcher of juice, a little spring touch. But the morning ticked past. 7 o'clock came and went. The house stayed quiet. Upstairs, it was still. No soft thumps on the stairs, no running water, not even a murmur from Jason's room. By 7:30, the sun was spilling full across the kitchen when her cell phone, which she'd left on the island while she cooked, buzzed with a message. We're really wiped out from last night. Best to let us sleep in today. We'll grab something later when we're up. Don't worry about us. She paused, her hand trembling just a bit as she read through the text from Katie. For a few moments, she only stared, the words floating in her mind. With a sigh, Evelyn neatly put away David and Katie's untouched breakfast, slid their plates, still warm, into plastic containers, gently stacking them for the fridge. Only her own plate she left sitting at the table. The lilac in the vase seemed lonelier than ever, too. Well, I suppose I can't blame them. They were out late last night. It happens. She tried to let it pass with a quiet breath, pressing that moment down into herself as she always did. Exrally. Later, not long after noon, Evelyn sat with her embroidery by the window, stitching little bluebells onto a tea towel. She'd started it for Jason's birthday, hoping to finish before school let out for summer. The sun flickered across the needle as she heard the front door swing open with a clatter. "Hi, I'm back. Could you give me a hand? This thing is heavy." Katie's voice called out, cheerful, floating down the hall. Evelyn set her stitching aside and shuffled to the entryway, where a large, battered cardboard box sat against the wall, dust dancing in the light. She blinked, not trusting her eyes at first. Inside was an old, worn recliner, a faded, reddish-brown imitation leather thing. With creases and splits along the surface, its armrests rubbed colorless and thin. There was dried glue along one leg, and when she lifted one side, a little cloud of dust billowed out. The whole chair looked as though it had languished in someone's garage for years. "I found it at a thrift store in town not far from the shopping center," Katie said, beaming, hand on her hip as she wiped a stray lock of hair away. "It just looked like something you get a lot of use out of, you know? Perfect for you." She smiled, all bright good cheer. "At your age, a massage chair is a must, right? It's a little old, but it still works." There was such pride in her voice, a note of relief, as if she had checked something essential off a long list and, finally, relax. Evelyn could not move, not at all. She tried to swallow, but her throat was tight. Hands trembling a little, she stared at the box, the chair, Katie's bright expression. "Is this really a Mother's Day gift?" Evelyn's heart squeezed, small and silent. "Thank you," she meant to say. She tried, but her voice was gone. Instead, her mind drifted back in time, just a few short years. Back to Mother's Day when Michael was still alive, and the children bounded through the living room with a little pot of pink carnations. Back to the joyful voices. "Mom, thank you for everything." And to the warmth blooming in her heart, just from that simple phrase. Now, she looked at the box again. This gift, there were no words of gratitude, no note, no card, not even the faintest hug or kiss on the cheek. There was no thank you, no thoughtfulness, no feeling. Just a thing. A cast-off. A used chair. Maybe Katie meant well. Maybe for her. Useful was the highest compliment, a sign of good sense. Maybe money was tight. Maybe she'd simply run out of ideas. But still, "This is perfect for you, Evelyn," Katie said again with that final, ringing cheer. "It suits your age." In that instant, a quiet, unseen crack ran through Evelyn's heart. Am I just an old woman now? Something to be managed, stored away? No longer a mother to be cherished, but a responsibility to arrange. Like old furniture? She could not shake that doubt. Not as she brought the chair inside, nor as the hours wound on. That day, the dining table sat quietly, the family never coming together. The only sound in the house was the compressor in the fridge, the creak of the settling floor. The old, battered massage chair sat alone in the living room. No one sparing it a glance, the hours slipping past. No flowers, no card, no arms around her in thanks. That night, Evelyn opened her journal. Mother's Day. The day I lost sight of what it means to be mom. Long after midnight, she couldn't sleep. Even when she finally climbed into bed, all she could see behind her eyes was that faded chair, its patchy arms, its forgotten seat, the outline of her own loneliness, sitting heavy in the dark. Is that the answer to Mother's Day then? Family ties, kindness, and gratitude. Did those even matter anymore? Or were they just shadows of old traditions now? Every time the thought welled up, another ache spread in her chest, quiet and deep. And still, the night pressed on all silence, all waiting as Evelyn Miller lay awake. Alone, listening for something. A word of thanks, a sign of love that never quite came. Late that night, Evelyn rose quietly, hoping not to disturb anyone to fetch herself a glass of water. Tiptoeing into the hallway in her robe and slippers, she stopped, startled by the faint sound of voices trickling out from behind David and Katie's closed bedroom door. She caught a few words, as clear as if the door had been open. "Honestly, Katie, that old massage chair was a good idea." "Yeah, I mean, David, it was just sitting at the office. Your boss was going to throw it out. Seemed like such a waste. And since it's Mother's Day, you know, I think it was fine." Chairs like that? It's really all people her age need, right? I mean, it's not like she's ever going to say thanks anyway. Even if you give her something, she never reacts. In that instant, Evelyn's heart seemed to freeze, the words echoing, cold and sharp, inside her chest. She's never going to say thanks anyway? Is that? Is that really how they see me? All this time have I truly just been like this to them? She stood there, rooted to the spot, the glass trembling in her hand, terrified she might drop it. In silence, Evelyn quietly returned to her small room at the end of the hall. She didn't say anything. She didn't ask them about it. She didn't try to explain herself or even protest. Instead, a sadness without words welled up from deep inside, rising through her chest, silent but heavy. An ache that simply would not fade. The sky was gray before dawn, clouds heavy and unmoving outside her window. As the faintest light appeared at the horizon, Evelyn slipped out of bed and methodically folded a few clothes, placed her toothbrush and hairbrush in a travel bag, and stacked 3 sketchbooks on top. The last thing she packed was a framed photo of her late husband, Michael. The whole process took barely 15 minutes. Then, with steady hands, she sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a note on a small, square piece of notepaper, her handwriting a little more uneven than usual. Thank you for everything. From now on, I won't trouble you any longer. Thank you for showing me, at last, where I stand. She set it square in the center of the table, sighing softly. There was no bitterness in the words, no resentment at all, only a still, gentle sense of letting go. A kind of peace newly found in surrender. Selwyn. When she opened the front door, the first drops of rain were beginning to fall. The air was misty and damp, a thin fog blanketing the street, and every gust of wind brought a cold wetness against her skin. Evelyn carried no umbrella. She simply straightened her back, shut the door quietly behind her, and stepped into the soft drizzle, suitcase in hand. Her footsteps on the sidewalk were careful, slow. She didn't look back at the house. Each stride felt purposeful, as if, with every step, she was erasing the proof she'd ever lived there. A silence so deep it seemed to hum around her. A memory crept in as she made her way down the block, her and Michael, long ago, traveling together after their 25th anniversary, strolling a sunlit riverfront somewhere out west. He'd turned to her, eyes smiling, and said almost offhand, "You know, Evelyn, sometimes people close up their hearts when you least expect it." For some reason, those simple words felt suddenly vivid, piercing her quiet like rain. Maybe I've been doing the same. Maybe I noticed the change long before now but pretended not to see it. Maybe, all these years, I kept my true feelings tucked away, hoping things would fix themselves. Ish. She reached the bus stop without meeting a soul. The early morning was hushed. Only the distant growl of a street sweeper and the patter of rain to keep her company. When the bus pulled in, Evelyn boarded, settling in the very back. There were hardly any passengers. Just a pair of construction workers nodding off. A young mother cradling a toddler. Staring out the fogged window, she watched houses and gardens, rows of budding maples, and the last traces of night flicker by. Softly, she whispered to herself, "Goodbye. Goodbye to the loneliness that called itself family." As she mouthed the words, something shifted inside her. A new resolve. Quiet but certain, warming her face even as rain streaked the glass beside her. It was the 15th of May, 2024, when Evelyn Miller brought her little suitcase into the doors of the Springfield Senior Support Center, a short-term living facility on the edge of Dutchess County, not too far upstate from New York City. The center was meant for older adults who either had nowhere else to go or who needed a break from family for a time. The room assigned to Evelyn had just enough: a single bed, a tiny wooden table, and a thin curtain separating her space from the next bed. The bathroom and shower down the hall were shared by everyone on the floor. The only TV was in the common lounge. Privacy was limited, the hall lights too harsh and the air always faintly plaints or scented. There were no flowers, no art on the walls. For the first few days, Evelyn felt as if time itself had slowed. Her only routine was waiting for meals. watching the sunlight crawl across the linoleum. No one asked questions here about family, about the past, or about why she'd arrived. Each resident seemed to carry their own silent burden, eating quietly at separate tables, rarely meeting anyone's gaze. "Oh, one here, please." No one asks. That's the small kindness of this place, maybe. That, for now, is enough. And, as the rain pattered on the windows and dusk softened the sterile light, Evelyn found herself for the first time in years, letting the silence simply be. She was, at last, seen by no one. But for the moment, she could rest, untouched by expectation or regret, quietly drawing breath in her new, uncertain world. Evelyn, too, stopped speaking to others much, her voice tucked quietly away inside her. She finished her meals in silence. At night, she would slip beneath her covers, waiting for the comfort of sleep to find her. And when morning came, the repetition continued, one calm, unchanging day after another. This pattern went on for 2 weeks. One afternoon, while Evelyn was seated on the faded sofa in the common lounge, sketchbook open across her knees, a young staff member stopped beside her. "Mrs. Miller, are you drawing?" he asked, his tone warm. "Those lines are so delicate, so gentle. I love how they seem to glow on the page." Evelyn glanced up, surprised at first by the sudden attention. After a breath, she gave a small, shy smile. "Yes," she said softly. "I used to draw quite a bit, years ago. I even taught a little." "Oh, that's wonderful," the young man replied. "Actually, I wanted to ask you about that. Every Friday, we have something here called hobby hour, sort of a little. Arts and crafts time, or whatever folks feel like. Would you be willing, maybe next Friday, to lead a drawing session? No pressure at all. We'd just love to have you share what you know." Evelyn hesitated, her hand hovering above the sketchbook. She could hear her own doubts whispering. "Can I really teach anyone at this point? I'm just an old woman, out of practice and out of place in the world." But then the young man offered an encouraging smile, steady and honest, adding, "Really, only if it feels good for you. Absolutely no obligation. Just whatever you can do." That was what finally nudged her over the edge. His easy assurance, the openness in his eyes. Slowly, Evelyn nodded her agreement. Maybe," she said. "I'll give it a try. Within my limits." The next Friday, Evelyn gathered her well-worn sketchbook and a handful of pencils, then made her way to the long cafeteria table in the corner of the dining room. To start, just 3 people arrived. A nervous older gentleman with trembling hands, a quiet woman whose gaze stayed fixed to the tabletop, and a petite lady in a wheelchair. "Today," Evelyn began, clearing her throat, "let's start with the simple act of drawing a line. It doesn't matter if it's straight or wobbly. Either way is just fine. The important thing is to let your feelings guide your hand, to let what's inside you find its way onto the page." She was surprised by the strength and steadiness in her own voice. For a while, there was only silence and the faint sound of pencils scraping lightly across paper, a gentle rhythm filling the room. Evelyn watched them, her students, each so intent on the work in front of them. And somewhere deep in her chest, an old, familiar warmth blossomed. I'd almost forgotten this feeling. How precious it is to watch someone's face change, even just a little, as they find their way. I always loved these moments. That evening, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Evelyn decided to make herself a cup of hot tea. She took out her faded journal and opened it to a fresh page. "Today, I met someone's gaze. In it, I saw a smile. Maybe, just maybe, I was able to mean something to someone again, even if only for a moment." That feeling, flickering in me, was real. Evelyn's handwriting shook ever so slightly across the page. But what she wrote now, in the hush of her new room, was quietly alive with possibility, a sure sign of hope breaking through. The following hobby hour, 5 people joined Evelyn's drawing table. The week after that, 10. One by one, residents chose their own colors, sharing little words here and there, but always pouring a bit of themselves out onto the waiting paper. The sight of them, each person expressing, in lines and shading, Their private hearts felt to Evelyn like her own past and future were finally beginning to meet. About a month later, another staff member watching the group from a distance murmured as if to herself, "It's gotten brighter here since you arrived, Mrs. Boylex." Miller. Evelyn smiled, soft and a little embarrassed. "Has it? I wonder. I sometimes think I've started to get some of my color back too." June 13th, 2024. The morning after a night of rain, Evelyn Miller finished a painting. A small, quiet piece, but one that soaked up all the memories of her time at the Senior Support Center. Her title, 30 Seconds of Silence. The painting showed a dinner table, cool and lonely in the gray light. Sunlight slipped through a narrow gap in the curtains. 3 mismatched bowls sat at one end, only one bowl held any soup, and across the table, the ghostly outlines of people whose faces turned away, never quite meeting each other's eyes. The palette was nearly colorless, just the faintest traces of blue and brown. The whole image sat suspended, airless, perfectly still. At the lower edge of the paper, Evelyn wrote a gentle message, just for herself. Sometimes it's not words, but silence that fills a room. And sometimes, if you listen, that silence will tell you everything you need to know. I once believed that simply wishing to be loved was selfish. But now I finally understand. Every single person deserves to be heard. Especially a mother. A staff member paused when he noticed Evelyn's words written below her painting. He nodded slowly, thoughtful. "Mrs. Miller, may I show this painting to the others? Would you be comfortable with that?" Evelyn hesitated for a moment, her expression uncertain. But then she smiled. A gentle, quiet smile, and nodded. "If it could reach even a single heart, even just a little, I'd be glad for that." Foolish. That very weekend, 30 Seconds of Silence was hung in the common space at the Senior Support Center. The painting soon caught the attention of the staff, and someone snapped a photo. Before long, it was shared on Facebook and other social media, the story traveling far and wide, far beyond Dutchess County. "This is the story of a mother," the caption read. "Imagine, please, what lies behind these 30 silent seconds in the painting. What lives there, unsaid, between family members at the table." People who saw the post were deeply moved. Tears were shed. The comments poured in. "This reminds me of my own mom. I never imagined how deeply my casual words could wound someone. All the little things I said. When was the last time I actually said thank you to my mother? I can't remember. I wish I could now." A few days later, the facility received a letter in a cream envelope, addressed in a strong, familiar hand. It was from Evelyn's son David. "To Mom? Honestly, I can't remember what we handed you that last Mother's Day. Was it that old chair? Something else? But now, seeing your painting, I think I finally understand what the silence meant. It hurts me to realize how insensitive we were, how careless. Please, if you could allow it, would you give us one more chance to talk, to see you? Even just once? I'm sorry, truly." The letter was quietly passed to Evelyn by one of the staff members. She sat silently, staring for a while at her name on the envelope, her hands gentle and quiet. At last, without opening it, she placed the letter in the small drawer beside her bed. There was no trace of anger in her face. No bitterness, no blame. Only a profound stillness, a peace, and a quiet resolve that ran deep. "I don't need more words." The 30 seconds of silence said everything about the distance between us. That was the phrase Evelyn whispered to herself in her heart, clear and steady. A week or so later, the Senior Support Center announced a special event, a story circle. The staff invited Evelyn as their guest speaker. The theme for the day was, "Things We Couldn't Say as a Mother." When it was her turn, Evelyn stepped to the mic. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice, though soft, was steady as she spoke, weaving one word carefully after another. "Mother's Day," she began, "seems to be a day for giving a gift instead of simply saying thank you. Sometimes, though, that gift, the thing itself, just ends up showing how far apart our hearts have grown. All my life, I tried to never ask for anything. I really did believe that not wanting was the right way to live. But maybe that wasn't right at all. Every person wants to be needed. And mothers, especially, are so often taken for granted, treated as if we're simply a part of the scenery. That's when it becomes so easy for us to disappear, to go unseen, sometimes even in our own family. That's why I painted that picture. The dinner table in silence, and all the words I had hoped someone would notice, hidden somewhere inside. Those 30 seconds. As Evelyn spoke, many in the audience wiped their eyes, trying to hold back their tears. That night, the senior support center was filled with ringing phones and quiet voices as one resident after another called home. Evelyn watched all this unfold from her balcony. She stood in the mild, comforting summer air and gazed up at the sky. Through a break in the passing clouds, the moon glowed, a soft, steady light. I won't go back. But my voice, I believe it must have reached someone, somewhere. With that strong, quiet feeling filling her heart, Evelyn opened her journal and wrote down a single line to end her day. Today, I think I finally fulfilled my role as a mother, for the very last time. And for me, that's enough. Yeah, narrator. Final message. That gift you gave your mother this Mother's Day? Was it truly a present? Or just an excuse to let go of something you didn't want? When you said, "This suits Mom perfectly," did love lie behind those words? So, as this story ends, a question lingers sweet and sharp in the air. A small call to remembrance for each reader, each listener, wherever you may be. When was the last time you truly looked for the silence behind someone's eyes? When did you last say thank you, not as a habit, but as a promise of love? Because sometimes the quietest seconds show us everything that truly matters. And sometimes, they are all we have left. I hope that, in some quiet way, this story has moved the silence deep within you, just a little. If, somewhere close by, there's a mother, perhaps one who has swallowed her words for years, who rarely lets her true thoughts break through, please, I ask you, speak to her. Even if it's only a single word. Thank you. Simple as it is, that word can be the very first key that finally unlocks the long, heavy silence. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, I'd be so grateful if you'd share it, passing along what you felt, whether with a like, a mention to a friend, or simply by telling someone close to you. Our promise to you, we will keep bringing more stories that light the heart, stories of quiet hope, gentle strength, and the small acts of kindness that so often change a life. Please subscribe to this channel and join us again soon for our next story. And one more time, from me to you, my sincerest, deepest thanks. H number seftiv. H numbers. Permini ichis tevels, and may eg, amam borders stalk came. May we remember that gratitude isn't just for special days, but for every ordinary day we share. And may your own words, soft or certain, be the light that leads someone home.